Hey guys, what's up? Carter here. Well, this video's been one that I've been wanting to make for a while, but I haven't for a couple of reasons. Mainly because nervous. I'm nervous. Nervous to make this video because it's a very talked about, knowledgeable, complex thing, and that is sharpening. There's so many great people out there that are just expert sharpeners that use all the greatest systems. They know about steel grains and how to get everything just hair-whittling sharp. That's not me. I'm just kind of more of a working edge, kind of regular, sharp kind of guy. But I do get a lot of questions from people asking about sharpening, and I know people get frustrated, and I'm aware of some general concepts that I think could help just kind of your average person with sharpening. So I just wanted to talk about those real quick. So this is just a very, very basic sharpening video, and I'm not going to get into angle degrees, mainly because I don't have a system that's good or complex enough to actually set specific degrees. I just use a Lenxi system with these stones, and just depending on how you clamp the blade is going to change your angle quite a bit. So I just generally try my best to match the factory angle, whatever that is. But anyways, let's get into it. So let's take a look here at this blade. So here's the blade stock. This is your secondary bevel right here. So this is the sharpened part on this blade right here. And being a full flat grind, it could have another bevel, or it could just be completely flat. In this case, it's completely flat, so we'll just make a copy of that blade right there. Sorry guys, wife came home. So just some quick terminology. Here's the bevel. Technically secondary bevel, we'll just call it the bevel because that's what we're going to be looking at. Here is the apex, which is this tip right here. Now, if there's one thing, well, there's two tips that I think will help any and all sharpeners, especially if you're just starting out. One is Sharpie. Use a Sharpie to cover all of this bevel, the secondary bevel, with black ink. That way when you're sharpening, you can see pretty clearly how it's contacting the blade. I do that all the time. I do that when I'm switching between stones sometimes, but especially at the beginning, I do that. Now, in order to actually make this sharp, you have to be hitting this apex. And to get it really sharp and to get the full effect out, you need to be hitting this apex with each and every stone. What happens sometimes is you might start with your rougher stones. You might be hitting the apex so you get it kind of sharp, but then as you move through the additional finer stones, you might be missing this. So you might be shining all this up and smoothing all of this up over here, which looks nice, but if you're not actually coming all the way to the apex, then you're not truly sharpening it through all those grits. Now, how do you know if you're getting to this apex? Well, the Sharpie will help with that somewhat. You have to look really closely, and there's still a possibility you could be coming right up to the apex, not quite hitting it, but you're still maybe taking the Sharpie off, or you just can't tell with that Sharpie. The other way is the burr. Now, the burr is the second most important part of sharpening. Important part of sharpening is the burr. And quick description of what the burr is. It's quite simple. If you have your bevel right here and you're sharpening this side, you're removing material. But what it's also actually doing is it's pushing material over like this. As you sharpen this side, it creates this little burr on this side. And then when you start sharpening this side, you take the burr off, but then you push it over here. And I think one thing that people struggle with is they just keep pushing this burr back and forth, and they don't understand why it's not getting sharp. You know, they're following the directions, they're doing this many swipes, this many swipes, this many swipes, and all they're doing is just pushing this burr back and forth, and it's just not going to be sharp with that burr. So how you can tell with the burr is just to touch it. I use my nail and I just run it along the blade, and you can feel if it catches. You know, you'll feel it kind of catch if there's a burr. And so generally the concept with sharpening, plain and simple, is you're trying to minimize that burr. And how you do that is as you move in the finer grit stones, you're going to be making a bigger burr quicker, just back and forth. And you know, as you move into finer and finer and finer stones, the burr that you're creating, you are creating one, but it's going to get smaller and smaller, and it's going to be easier and easier to minimize that. So the definition of a purely sharp knife is no burr at all. And you achieve that by moving through the grits of the stones until you finally get to stropping. And that's why stropping is so important. I mean, it is absolutely important. I used to think that it wasn't a big deal, and I'd always skip stropping. Don't skip stropping. You know, get some polishing compound, get a belt, that's all you need. But that will just clean up any remnants of a little tiny burr that you might have and really just make it blazing, blazing sharp. So generally, when I do sharpening, what I'll do is I'll sharpen one side, feel for the burr, okay, got the burr. Then I'll move to the other side, feel the burr, okay. Then with the same grit stone, I come back to the original side and just lightly kind of clean up that burr with trying to not make another burr on the other side. Of course, it'll probably happen, or you might not be able to clean this up totally, but it'll just make it easier when you move on to your next stone to kind of start with a blank canvas and not have to worry about cleaning up that burr. And it's also just a good practice as you move through the stones, just trying to get it as clean as possible before you move on to the next. My other tip, freehand sharpening on a stone, until you master a system, don't even think about it. Don't think that some sharpening system like the SharpMaker or the Lanxey system or Wicked Edge, don't think that that's like some no-brainer system that you just throw your knife in and go through the motions. No. It takes a lot of skill, a lot of practice, and you're going to get better and better and quicker at getting a good edge. So until you get that mastered, you know, I see some of these people starting off on freehand stones, and you know, you're just crying for trouble. I mean, because there's so many more variables that you have to master in order to do that. And then if you're trying to do the basics on top of that and just get an understanding for how the burr works and getting it sharp and keeping your angles consistent and things like that, don't even think about it. Get a system, master that before you even think about trying freehand stones. Just throwing that out there. Of course you can do whatever you want, but that's what I'd recommend. Another thing, I forget what number I'm on, that pops into my head as key to sharpening is consistency. Precision isn't quite as important. I mentioned how my Lanxey system before, the bevel length, so basically the angle is not perfect. It's close, but it's not perfect. The degrees are not perfect between the two sides. Doesn't matter. You wouldn't be able to tell if this was perfect or if it was like this and I were to give it to you the same sharpness, you wouldn't be able to tell. One would not cut better than the other. But the main thing is that you're consistent with your system, so that when you're going through all your different stones, you know, kind of like goes back to the making sure you're hitting the apex, that you're hitting it exactly right. And I'll talk more in depth when I do my sharpening video with the Lanxey system, because there's some tricks with that system specifically that you can use to help keep things consistent as you move through all the stones. You know, I can't speak for other systems. I know, you know, one of the benefits of the expensive systems like Wicked Edge and SharpMaker, no, not SharpMaker, oh, I can't think of it, the one that Jay Davis 882 uses, the other really popular one. One of the benefits of an expensive system like that is it's very, very consistent. It's got those arms, you know, just keep your stones as you move through them exactly as the last one was. Some of the cheaper systems, it doesn't do that. And it also allows for a lot more human error when you're using it, and I've got some techniques to help mitigate that, but it allows for a lot more human error at getting your angles wrong and not consistent and things like that. Like I said, there are some specific things you can do to help minimize that problem with like the Lanxey system, or there's a few others. The other thing let's talk about is how much sharpening do you need. For instance, this blade, at the time of this shooting, I've gone through all the hard use tests, but I haven't done my final sharpening yet. So on this edge, which was very, very good when I started these last 3 tests, I chopped through that twig or the little stick or whatever. I sharpened it, carved that stick with it. I cut through the rope, I cut through all that hose, and I did the mud test, which included sticking it in the lawn. So it is not razor sharp right now. However, I would not, except for the fact that I want to do in demonstration, I would not run this through my Lanxi system. I would simply strop this back to sharpness. And that's kind of just something you need to decide. Every time you run this through a full system like that, you're removing material. And so you want to postpone that until it's absolutely necessary. The second your knife gets a little dull, you don't want to throw it into your system and start grinding away steel, or else you're going to wear out your blade way quicker than you need to. Usually, a simple strop will bring you right back, or running it on a sharp maker for a few minutes will bring it right back to where it needs to be. It's only very rarely that you need to, if it's suffered damage, or it's just been, or you've been, creating micro bevels and stropping for a really long time, that you actually need to go in and do a full sharpening on the bevel and kind of reprofile it, get it right back. Speaking of which, micro bevel. Micro bevel, I mean, just like you think it is. So let's say you've got your secondary bevel right here. You've been using it, it's curved at the apex because you've been sharpening it. So rather than do a full sharpening reprofile where you actually remove material all the way down your bevel in order to bring it back to a sharp point, what you do is you just take down here, you just create a little mini bevel at the bottom. And you just basically do that by a more acute angle than what this bevel is. So, and you can do that. The sharp maker is really good at doing that because it runs at what, 45 degrees or something like that. If you just do a 45 degree straight down, depending on the angle that your blade's at, that will probably just be creating a micro bevel for you. So that's it, guys. Just kind of, like I said, a quick overview, high level stuff of some basics you need to keep in mind when you're trying to get into sharpening. Obviously, as you move into more seriousness with it, you're going to want to look at some of these YouTube channels that specifically get down into the details and the techniques and things like that. But this video is more for people that just look at sharpening and they're just like, I don't get it. I run my blade on a stone or on the sharp maker and I can't get it sharp. And that is probably because of the burr. Gosh, I hate it when you can't think of a word even though you've just been saying it. Probably because of a burr issue or because your angle's wrong and you're not actually hitting your apex. You're grinding away at your sharp maker and the angle that it's hitting it, you're just kind of hitting up here in the middle and you're not actually hitting your apex, so you're not actually sharpening anything. That's where the Sharpie comes in handy because that way you can kind of more clearly see where you're actually making contact, so you know how to adjust your angle to actually get it sharp. Alright guys, that's it. Take it easy. Have a good day.